Woo! Well, Scottie Pippen is obviously a huge LeBron James fan, almost as much as Nick Wright. And I get it, because there's a lot of Scottie Pippen in LeBron's game. You know, they both like point forwards, facilitators, great defenders. They pass, they're tremendous passers. They played the entire game and both scored at a high level. Obviously, LeBron at a much higher level than Scottie, but still, similarities in their game. And I agreed with Scottie earlier in the week when he said KD still has to learn how to will a team to victory. He has not proven that. That's the one thing left for him to prove, that he can will his own team to victory. But in this case, in this GQ article, Scottie went too far. To almost blame that Game 7 loss on Kevin Durant? Right. I mean, Kevin Durant was spectacular. Right. And to say he has to utilize his teammates weren't giving him any help. Durant's not the type to just not try to get anybody else involved. They were running from the ball. They were giving it to Kevin Durant at half court and then going over and standing and watching him create something, Kevin. Go ahead and do something. He was out there on an island. And I don't like Kevin Durant is always been a team player. Maybe to a fault. You know, I mean, in Oklahoma City, in Golden State, and in Brooklyn, he is as much of a team player as LeBron James. Now, he's not the facilitator that LeBron is, but if I was a superstar, I'd rather play with KD. It's easier to play with KD because he doesn't dominate the ball. If I'm a role player, I'd rather play with LeBron because LeBron's going to set me up and get me in positions I can't get myself in. But I just think he went too far in saying KD's not a team player. And then when you throw shots like this, you got to be ready to take them back, because I know Nick likes to act like Scottie Pippen was Kobe Bryant so he can diminish Jordan. No. But he wasn't. He got blemishes on his record, and Scottie told no lies other than to say they followed Phil, not you. They followed Michael, not
KD
you.
told no lies, you mean. You mean KD told no lies. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, KD told no lies other than
Phil. Yeah, I mean, look, this is bad. I don't respect it. I don't like it. You know, sitting here on television as a former player, you have to be able to lean in and call it how you see it. But I'm always going to be pro player. I'm always going to give the player the benefit of the doubt because I sat in their seats. I sat in those locker rooms, and you understand it. There's outside of that locker room, people they're not going to get it, not going to understand it. So for Scottie Pippen to actually stand up and kind of demean KD, and you talked about the Game 7 and just comparing play. Like, you don't do that. There's a way of doing it without disrespecting the game and disrespecting a player. Because, like you said, you're opening yourself up to criticism as well. So there can be an argument that if you remove Michael Jordan, you probably never win a championship. It's a great argument. Like, yeah, you're walking around as a great, and you are great, and we respect you as one, but now if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. So I don't like it, and anytime I'm in these conversations, what I do is I always give a disclaimer. It's like, yo, when I was in this situation, this is what I did, but here, boom, now I hold the guy accountable. I feel like he just went way too far. It was disrespectful to the games, disrespectful to KD, and some people may look at me and say, well, Brandon, what are you talking about? It's just a simple conversation. Well, no, it isn't. There's a fraternity. There's a way that players are supposed to talk about players. There's a way that we're supposed to criticize players. Now, you don't, not criticize a player. There's a way of holding them accountable. That's all I'm saying, Nick. I just don't like it. Yeah. He went a little too far.
And I understand that. And I also, listen, I am not Wilds. I'm not engaging in a lot of the kind of tertiary Kevin Durant slights that have been going on since Game 7 because I thought he was brilliant in Games 5, 6, and 7. Now, Wilds, you know me, I always kind of have future takes on the simmer. Like, let's make sure it's a little warm in case we got to get there. Now, I will tell you, if somehow, some way, Trae Young, with no other All-Stars, finds a way to beat the Bucks team that KD couldn't beat with Kyrie Irving for 4 games, James Harden for 3 games, well, then maybe some of the KD slander will be moved to the front burner. Because there's a future take of, wait, the Hawks could beat the Bucks, but the Nets couldn't? What does that say? But we're not there yet, and I think the Bucks are going to win the series. What I think Scottie said, though, that was the most interesting part of this, is what he said about what really hurt Kevin Durant, which is coaching. Can we show it?
That's right.
Because this is a great point by Scottie. Here's the quote. Durant was so exhausted, he couldn't go to the bucket. I'm going to be honest. Felt like Steve Nash should have put KD on the block. Just let him sit there and throw passes so he could rest. But he kept him at the top of the floor where they were getting all up under him. It wasn't fair, but that's just coaching. Steve Nash is an inexperienced coach, so he got to know he wore KD down. And I think that is absolutely right. You can't, Wilds, prevent Kevin Durant's injury. And they did Kyrie Irving's injury, pardon me.
Yep.
And they did everything they could to give James Harden as much time and maintenance as they could during the regular season, in the playoffs. They did everything they could. That hamstring just went bad on him at the wrong time. And listen, sometimes a guy like Joe Harris is going to prove to be, and maybe he will prove this to be a regular season player. And you just got to deal with it. Like, it just happens sometimes, right? The guy, what they could have done a better job of is making sure that if you're going to play KD the entire game, he has spots within the game to rest. That is one thing LeBron had mastered by his last year in Cleveland. Like, all right, if you're going to need me to play 46 minutes, I'm going to get some rest on the court. And they weren't able to find that for Durant. I don't know if that's how much of that is Nash finding it for him by the sets they draw up, or KD knowing how to find it for himself by where he goes on the court. But I do think the most interesting thing Scottie said was pointing the finger at Nash a bit, who has skated in most quarters except for here, because I thought that was a huge part of the reason the Nets aren't still playing.
You're totally right. And here's the thing, Broussard, and I want your take on this. You wrote hundreds of columns, thousands of columns. A few turns of a phrase take something that seems incendiary or seems subtle and can turn it incendiary. So what if Scottie Pippen said this? And I think it gets his point across. Kevin Durant is a great player, but he went home, and that wasn't his ultimate goal. I think he should spend the offseason and figure out, like all great players do, how to get even better. And one way that I think he can get better, what LeBron James has really mastered, is ways to have his other teammates go to the next level. And then this is just me freestyling. Like, you've seen LeBron in his career take Ilgauskas. Like, wow, Ilgauskas is good. Wow, Mozgov all of a sudden deserves a big contract. Man, J.R. Smith sure is good. Wow, Alex Caruso, he should get some all-star votes. That's all because of LeBron's ability to get other teammates to another level. And I think it's a fair statement to say great players always look for something to add to their game, and maybe KD can do that too. I don't feel like that's an incendiary comment, and I feel like that's what Pippen was trying to get across, but it came out a little hotter than he wanted it to.
Yeah, I think it was fair, especially the first half of your column. That was very well written, Wilds. I give you credit for that. But I don't, look, Kevin Durant's an entirely different type of player than LeBron James. Kevin Durant is not the facilitator that LeBron is. He's more of a pure scorer. That's why, like I said, in some ways he's easier to play with because he's not going to dominate the ball. He's not going to over-dribble. You kind of fit him in. I guarantee you, Kyrie enjoys playing with KD more than with LeBron just because of it makes more room for Kyrie to do his thing. It's hard to get a little break on the court.
Big guy.
Yeah, I mean, just to close the loop on this coaching thing, man, the reason why I always push back on you, Nick, when you don't crush Steve Nash, you just call it how you see it. And yes, he is inexperienced, but at the end of the day, great players, they overcome coaching. Great players, they call their own shots. We can't, That's why when we have this conversation with
Okay.
Giannis, when Giannis always says, well, I did this because Bud told me to do it, and we crush them in the media. You hear Shaquille O'Neal doing it. We do it on our show. People doing it on their other show because we're like, that is counterculture to sports. That's counterculture to superstars. Superstars always say, I'm going to go check myself back in this game, or coach, I'm taking this shot, or no, I'm going to go guard that man. So when you talk about the Nets, you got 3 great players there, and Kevin Durant is more than capable of saying, yo, coach, let me get on the block. Like, this is what I'm going to do. You see LeBron
That's
James
fair.
do it. You see CP3 do it. We saw the late Kobe do it. So that's my whole thing. Even in football, how many times do we see Peyton Manning or even Aaron Rodgers get the play call in and then do this, wave off the coach saying, no, I'm not calling that play, and they call their own deal.
That's
So
right.
I just think there's more to the story
That's a
than
good
just
point.
blaming the coach.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.